Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Slodgy. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it featured on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. The world wants to hear your experience, so please get a hold of me and let's tell yours on a future episode of Uncomfortable. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. And please remember to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you can. That is the main way that you, the listener, can help get this show out in front of more people. And with more people listening, that means more people coming forward with their experiences. Also, for those of you who might be looking for a little bit of a change of pace, please head over to Uncomfortable Podcast on YouTube and hit subscribe and the notification bell. That way you will be made aware every time I upload a video version of the podcast. If you're interested in helping support the show, head over to patreon.com/uncomfortablepodcast770 and check out the 3 levels we have there. See if anything appeals to you. Or if a standalone contribution is more your liking, you can do that as well through the red circle link that will be in the show notes below. September 14th, 2024 is the date for Bigfoot and Brews and Spirits 2. Again, being held within the wonderful confines of Sister Lakes Brewing Company. On the Bigfoot side of things, we've already secured Ohio's Amy Boo from Project Zoo Book and the Olympic Project out in Washington. And on the paranormal side, special guest speaker will be a listener favorite, the Archbishop Christina Rake. I am in talks with several other presenters. As they commit, I will make you aware. I'm hoping to have the lineup solidified by the end of January, and tickets will go on sale soon after that, so stay tuned for more info. As for tonight's guest, she is a regular contributor to the L.A. Marzulli monthly newsletter, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, and a lifelong abductee. She is here to talk about the current book, Stolen Seed, The Evil Harvest, which chronicles her lifelong experience with these beings. So if you're ready, let's get into it. So if you will, please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to Karin Wilkinson. Karin, welcome to Uncomfortable.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here with you and just grateful that you've got me on the show tonight and looking forward to our conversation.
Thrilled to have you here, dear. It's been I was very, very happy that you were able to make this happen in such short notice.
Yeah.
And I realized you had a cancellation, and thankfully it worked out time-wise with me, and perfect. I've been looking forward to this. This topic it's a disturbing one, to say the least. And I've talked to people who have claimed experiences with extraterrestrials. I have talked to people and myself have witnessed unusual things in the sky. I've spoke with one gentleman who literally felt that these things were acting in a way in his life that made him feel like he was an asset to them. Like a physical asset, like he was property, but not in not in a derogatory way. He felt that his life was being bettered by the involvement with them. He talked about injuries that he had that were, one day he woke up and realized he still had he regained full rotation of his shoulder. So, I mean, it's a 180 degree turn from what, some people experience, and they think this is wonderful and they're benevolent and everything. But your case doesn't seem to be quite so sunshiny
No, it really isn't. And I don't. I think everyone has a right to their story and their opinions and their feelings about this, and especially about these entities and what's happened to them. And so, for each person, that's their own individual story, and those are their own individual, responses to that. But for me, I've based on my experiences, a lifelong experiences in this, and so many people I've talked to, um, it hasn't been a uh, positive experience. They haven't been my benevolent benefactors or space brothers, or as George Adamski said in the 50s. It's it hasn't been a positive experience. It has been more like a grooming experience. More like what some people refer to as maybe what you would experience in an abusive relationship, where there's these things happening, but every now and then they throw in something positive to try to make it seem better, to give you a
You
reason to
used
stay in
an
it.
you used an interesting word, grooming.
Yes,
Can you expound on that?
absolutely.
Groomed for what?
Well, I was being taken by non-human entities from as early as I can remember. I have memories from, you know, preschool, pre-K, that kind of thing, where I was terrified of my father's side of the family because they were tall and blonde and thin and fair-haired, and they looked very much like these Nordic entities that I had already been encountering. Um, and in my
Now,
young
now to
mind,
be fair, no, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, it's okay.
but to be fair, your learning of and your reference to the Nordic
Hmm.
entities, um, you know, at the age that you were at,
Hmm.
you had no idea about Nordic. I
No,
mean, that's something that you learn
right,
later in life,
right,
but
and I'm
you
using it.
were recognizing the
Yes.
similarities in the way they looked
Right.
versus
And
okay,
I'm using it now just as a reference so people know what I'm talking about, because
sure.
that's something that can be easily referenced in the UFO community, is what the Nordic entities are. They looked similar to human, but their eyes were very large. Their hair was almost like a translucent, like it seemed to pick up whatever color they were around. They were tall, thin, icy, kind of icy blue green eyes.
Typically a very attractive
Hmm.
um, species.
Yeah.
That's usually the way they're
I
described
mean,
as being very appealing in the way that they look.
I was just a little kid, so I think they were more scary than anything else to me because their eyes were big, bigger than ours. So it definitely was scary to me. Plus, I was being taken against my will. And as a little kid, being taken out of my bed in the middle of the night, I was terrified. And then these beings that I was encountering, were that was very, very scary for me. So of course, I'm going to translate that to another human who is not in they weren't, my family, my dad's side of the family were not aliens, I'm not saying anything like that. They were normal human beings, but they were scary to me because they had similar features. And as a small child, you don't make those very specific distinctions. And so, that was really scary for me. But from as early as I can remember, I was taken against my will. I didn't want to be taken. I didn't want to be, taken from my bed, taken by these entities, you know, over and over again. It it wasn't a pleasant experience, and it was experiences that went on throughout my life.
Now it's interesting that you talk about this like from the standpoint of like this was. I'm assuming this is not something that you had to go through some kind of regressive therapy
No.
or some kind of hypnosis. You were always aware that this was going on.
Oh, yes, absolutely aware. And I don't remember every episode, every instance that they took me. Um,
Mm.
a lot of times I only remember to the point that they showed up and then I was switched off, like sleep, and then waking up back in my bed with pajamas inside out, or, I'm wet the bed because I was scared or whatever. So But I don't remember every episode, but I remember quite a bit of it. I remember different pieces and parts of it and different things that happened. And I always remembered it. It was just always with me. And I'm not alone in that. I mean, I've had a lot of people ask that question, and I've since met a lot of people who also have similar lifelong memories like mine. It's not something that's easy to talk about. Not a lot of people want to share this and come out with it and, certainly write a book about it. But
The
it is.
fact that you did, the fact that you did write a book about it,
Mhm.
and you are willing to go in public now and speak on your experiences.
Yes.
This might be putting the cart before the horse, but now that you're in that arena where you are out talking about it, you're out of the closet, as it were, as far as the experiences having happened to you.
Mhm.
And like you said, you've run into and got to talk with other people who have experienced this. What what is the best thing for somebody who has had these kind of experiences? Either more so than what you have, less than what you have, but experiences nonetheless. Where do they turn?
Oh,
And and how do they get help? And then after that, then let's start to go back to the beginning and get into your experiences.
okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's, one of the reasons I did this. And the way that the book came about maybe will help answer that. Because I started out, I never thought I was going to talk about these things. It was too hard. I've spent a lifetime trying to create this, keep that over here and the rest of my life over here and not let,
Compartmentalizing.
yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. And I had some PTSD therapy for a near death experience, which I write about. And after that, it gave me the tools that I needed to not only deal with those intense feelings and fears that I was having, but it parlayed into being able to deal with a lifetime of these other fears and issues and everything that had gone along with being taken my whole life. So once I was able to start dealing with it and really allowing myself to think through it and to be able to talk about it without falling apart completely, and I talked to my, shared the story of my husband and some and things, then I found LA Marzulli. It was kind of strange how we ended up being able to get together, but we he ended up recording my testimony. I shared with him what had happened to me. Um, and it was really strange because I didn't think I was going to be able to share everything that had happened, but I really did share quite a bit of what had happened to me. And he utilized that footage for the fourth movie in the UFO series he did on the abduction phenomenon. And after that, I was at a few events with him, and I started talking to people. People came up to me and wanted to talk. They wanted to share their stories. They had had similar experiences and never been able to talk to anyone about it. So they were thanking me for sharing my account and then able to kind of get it off of their chest and just talk about it. And that's another one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I wanted it to be okay for people to talk about it. Start creating an environment where it's not taboo, where you're not crazy. It's okay. These things
Right.
really do happen to a lot of people, more than most people can imagine. And so it kind of brought about a way, I don't know what the best thing is for any one person to do who's been taken, who's been abducted by non-human entities. For me, the best thing to do was to reaffirm my Christianity, understand that I could call on Jesus and these abductions would stop, and they have. Um, it's helpful for me, and it was helpful for a lot of other people to find someone to talk with, to talk to, um, just to be able to get it out there. If you don't want it to be happening, then to know how to stop it. I think that's the number one thing. And I think it's important to just help remove the stigma so people can talk about it and deal with it. Because if you're carrying around something that is so just heavy and so emotional and so damaging. And the amount of damage that I've listened to people talk about that's happened in their lives is incredible and it's sad. And just because they've been carrying this around and there's no one to talk to because there's such a horrible stigma behind it. They're afraid if they say something, everyone's going to say they're crazy. So,
And I've gone through that with, I mean, before we started recording, I told you about the lights I saw when I was younger, 12, 13, whatever it was. I've had some significant paranormal experiences with what I can only what only amounts to it was actually my dad after having passed away. So I've lived my life experiencing things, and I understand that desire to want to talk about it, but the fear of people looking at you, ridicule, rolling their eyes, and to be honest with you, that's what pushed me to provide this space for people to be able to come talk about the things that nobody else will listen to them talk about. And there are a lot of people that listen to this show, and there's a lot of people that listen to other podcasts that cover these same things. People want to hear about it, but giving them a space to do it is of the utmost importance.
yeah, no, I think it is so amazing and great that you are doing this because it is important. There aren't a lot of places for people to be able to share and talk about it. And not just that, but to hear somebody else talk about it and be, oh, I get it. I understand. Me too. I've had that experience. I know what they're saying, what they're talking about. I'm not alone. You know, it's it's one thing to suffer trauma. It's another thing to suffer that trauma and feel like you're alone in the world with that trauma.
Right.
So when you know that there are others who have experienced things and who have gotten through it, then it gives you hope that you can get through it as well and that you can move forward from it and move on from it and stop it if that's what you want and do something good with it. Turn it in, use it for something good. Use it then to help other people, or just be someone who listens to other people. Like, you're listening to other people and engaging people in these conversations that are difficult to have and that a lot of people don't want to entertain these conversations.
So throughout your experiences, in that quest for finding a safe place to talk about these things, have you been able to find groups that were, I guess, for all intents and purposes, legitimate groups that weren't looking to fleece you
Mhm.
of money and let's put you under regressive hypnosis, stuff like that? Have you found groups that are, or you're shaking your head no? and
No,
and
I'm researching a few still because I want to have some things like that to put on the website for people to check out. And so a few people have given me some to look at, and I am going through those carefully. I want to really carefully vet things before I put them on my website. There are people that, I mean, so I couldn't really find a group, but what I did find were people who were in the same situation that I could talk to through like the making of that movie with L.A. Marzulli. Then there were three other people who had similar circumstance to mine, and we were able to start talking. Meeting people at conferences, that is a great way to meet people. Go to a conference with
yeah.
similar, like your Bigfoot and Bruce conference. People are going to meet people with similar experiences and interests, and that's a great way to meet people. Groups like Discord groups, Facebook groups, things like that. I'm involved in different groups like that. But at the time, no. And I was the first time I was able to talk to a couple of other people, I was in heaven. I couldn't believe it. I just never thought I would have that experience of two or three other people who understood because they had been there too. And we were like, yes. And then did this happen to you? Yes, that happened to me. What about this? Yes, just sharing these things that other people find crazy or fantastical or too far out to even entertain having that conversation. And suddenly you're with a bunch of people who know exactly what you're talking about. You don't even have to describe it completely because they know they've been there. And I think there's a lot more people out there who could have those conversations. It's just you don't walk around letting everybody know because they being the powers that be, whether it's the government, predictive programming, what have you, have created this stigma that you're crazy if you talk about something like this.
Yeah.
But now our government's saying, well, yeah, we do have the ships. Well, yeah, we do have the bodies. Well, yeah, we do have, everything. Yeah, this is a thing. Yes, we have been, So, I think slowly some of that's going to go away, although I've yet to hear them talk to a survivor of, an abduction survivor. So, we'll see if they go that far, but at least they're starting to have the conversation.
It saddens me a little bit that John Mack was lost so early,
Yeah.
because I wonder where his I wonder where his path would have led to, had he been able to live out his days.
Oh, he was a pioneer, that's for sure. Yeah.
He was a pioneer. He was, I've seen multiple interviews that he had done with people who had gone through an abduction experience. And, the big thing is, if you go to a psychiatrist, they're going to have leading questions, and they're going to have this, and, implanted memories, and agreed that all those things are very, very possible. You have to be very careful.
Mhm.
But everything that I had ever seen from him, he was just genuinely interested in trying to help these people get to the bottom of what had happened. And after every conversation that he had, it became more and more apparent that he was not able to just brush the dust off of this and say, it's something else. So it would interest me to know where he would be at now with the advent of the, I'll call it disclosure
Yeah.
because there's not a better word for it,
Right.
but I mean, I've gone through so many, as I told you before we started talking, at 5 years old, I was obsessed with UFOs. So in the past few years, I've been exuberant over, the idea that there's actually the conversation has taken place within our government about it.
Oh, yeah.
But then, almost just a couple of weeks ago, most recently, you have I forget what his name is. He's one of the House speakers.
Pulled back on it.
They're getting pulled back on it,
Yeah.
and it's because they're getting pressure from, outside three-letter agencies that are,
Mm.
so it's like, I don't think we're ever going to, at least in my lifetime, what's left of it, I don't think we're ever going to get that satiating, uh, yes, there it is,
Yeah, right.
finally,
Right.
but
Well,
I think it has helped with opening the floor to people who have a little more sack and are able to start talking about it.
right. Now, I tend to agree with you. I really don't think we'll ever see full confirmation, full disclosure. I think we're getting bits of confirmation, bits of disclosure here and there, but full disclosure would mean they would have to admit to their involvement, right? And from the
Exactly, and that's
time I
why they're
was
not going to do
little,
it.
there were human beings working side by side with these alien entities. So I don't think that, it's going to be in their best interest to admit that they've allowed them to take humans and animals and use them for experimental purposes and take them against their will. I don't think that's going to look very good on their
Yeah,
whatever next election they're up for or what have you. So, you know, uh, yeah, I am happy to see that at least there is more and more confirmation coming out. The report that came out in 2022, it wasn't a new report, but that was released, actually confirmed many of the ill effects that people were having from being exposed to, um, it's called acute anomalous effects and side effects for people who had been exposed to what UAPs, whatever they're calling them,
Right.
non NHIs, UAPs. And this list was, I think it had about 77 different um, items on it. I think I checked all but 15 off of the list, including missing pregnancies. And
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
yeah, and it was an old list of symptoms that MUFON had put together years before, but they were just using that list as opposed to even compiling a more current list based on their more current findings. So I found that really kind of sad and odd as well, that what's being released to us are just old bits that they know aren't even up to date, but here's
Mhm.
something to keep everyone quiet. But what was kind of good about that was it gave those of us who have been trying to talk about these things, it was kind of some vindication that, see, I've been trying to say these things were happening, not just me, I'm talking about everyone in this
Right.
field and people like you. And suddenly they're confirming that, yeah, those things do happen. Yes, we know about that. Yes, that is a problem. So there are a few little things coming out, but again, I do agree with you. I don't think we'll ever have any kind of a complete confirmation or disclosure at all.
If we do, it's going to end up coming through a country that feels that it owes us no favor.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe that they think that they will be causing harm by doing it.
Yeah.
By we're gonna leak all this information, and whether you like it or not, kind of thing. So, but I think there's the powers that be have tentacles outstretched everywhere and in places that that they can prevent a lot more from happening than
Absolutely.
we know. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone ever does get away with sharing more than they want. But those of us trying to share, we certainly have our share of problems trying to share this information. Um,
I absolutely do.
but
So let's kind of get to the crux of it. You indicated that these had been going on from the time of uh, kindergarten, preschool,
mhm.
and so give me a timeline from that age till when did they stop?
Just a couple of years ago, it went on until there was a time frame where it stopped. There were times when it was more active than others, but it was always ongoing. Um, but there was a time frame when it stopped when I was around 18 years old, and I first found my Christian faith. And then I fell away from that when I met my first husband, and it started again. And it was about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when I found my way back, really back to my faith, because I had really gone down some um, different paths, and that's fine, but I found my way back to my faith again. And once I did that, um, it was just like, how did I forget all of this? It was all right here waiting for me the whole time. And I was able to call on a higher authority than me, a higher authority than them, to stop it. And was able to stop it once and for all. Now, they still try. It's not like they don't try to show up. They will show up outside the window, or, the lights still show up and things like that, but they know that they can't get to me. They can't cross the threshold. I've broken the threshold covenants. And this is an area where it would be good to talk to my friend Vicki Joy Anderson. She's been instrumental in helping me with some of these things as well. But and I'll put a link to that on my website for listeners too, because she has a book called They Only Come Out at Night, which talks about sleep paralysis and breaking those types of generational curses and covenants and things like that. And it's really not my area of expertise, except to say that I was able to break those things.
And I have to assume by the way that the conversation is going that your belief in your religious beliefs are what's behind what's stopping them. And that to me is that's a disconnect for me. I've heard several people talk about the idea that these things are demonic
Mm-hmm.
and that they are, you know, in some way, shape, or form, fallen angels
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And I, in my brain, I have a huge disconnect with that. Not saying you're right or wrong, and not saying I'm right or wrong. But it's interesting for me to hear from a perspective of somebody that is able to stop ongoing abductions and interactions with that as the mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that, first of all. Yeah, because I think we all have, everyone's entitled to how they feel and their feelings and their thoughts about these things. So, what I am sharing is just what I know from my experience, my time with these entities. I spent a great deal of time in their presence and from my study, and I don't have any authority over them, but they have a creator just like we do. But they have the same creator that we do.
Mm,
And there is a hierarchy. And their creator, who is also our creator, has a power and the hierarchy and authority over them. So you can call them whatever you want. You don't have to call them fallen angels or anything like that. Um, when I refer to them in my belief system is that, you know, God created different entities, not just us humans. And
right.
some of those entities rebelled and fell away. And the ones that have rebelled and fallen away are not here to be kind to us. They're not here to help us. They are trying to bring people away from truth. And I understand that for some people, their interactions with non-human intelligence have been good and positive, and I have had very good interaction with angelic beings, and I can talk about that as well. But for these entities that were taking me, I just can't, uh, you know, kidnapping a child against their will, a 5-year-old child, taking a 5-year-old boy and implanting him with something, leaving him outside his locked house in the cold at night. I'm talking about my friend Emil Jewick, who was in the LA's fourth movie that I talked about that I'm in. Um, Taking fetuses from women, not just me, but other women that I've spoken with that are also documented in some of these movies. Um, Kidnapping people, mutilating cows. These animals are left with no blood, with all of their blood drained, with some organs missing, with certain body parts missing. It's sad. It's terrifying for the ranchers. It's terrifying for the animals. It's terrifying for people being taken and children. So I can't put my head around those being benevolent actions. If you were to kidnap your neighbor's child, you'd get put in jail because
Absolutely.
it's not something that's okay. Um, so for me, my experiences, then those of my friends, they weren't positive experiences. And then on top of that, we go share our experiences and we talk about what's happened. And there are people out there saying that these are just psychotic delusions. A lifetime of psychotic delusions, and we're all having the same one. So, it's a rough road for anyone who has the um the guts, who has the strength to come forward and try to share and try to help other people. And I have a lot of respect for anyone who's willing to share their experiences and try to help other people, because there needs to be someone for people to reach out to, and there just aren't any places to do that.
Yeah, there are not many.
Mm-hmm.
You are correct there. So I mean, I guess we could spend a lot of time talking about your individual experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and not that that's not valid or warranted, but I guess while I have you here, and I guess this kind of changes a little bit of my the direction we were going to go, but with as much as this happens, and with the consistency that it happened to you, I have to assume that you're not just a one-off. There's not something so super special about you, and I don't mean any offense, that they would, oh yeah, we got to keep coming back and coming back and coming back and
Mm-hmm.
coming back for this one, because this one's really something.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect that is probably closer to the norm than the exception. So how are they able to do that? Are you tagged? Are you have you been betrothed to them?
That's a good question. No, I've not been betrothed to them. That's something definitely that happened back in the days of Genesis 6, when the sons of God saw that the uh, daughters of men were beautiful and took wives of them all that they chose. They used the word wives and they used the word cleave in the Bible back, in those times, in the days before Noah, before the flood. Um, and then in the book of Daniel, it's when it talks about the return and the end times and things like that. It talks about how um, the end times would be like the days of Noah, and that they would come back, but they wouldn't. Their seed would mingle with the seed of men, but it wouldn't cleave to them. There would be no marriage. There would be no union like that, but they would still be trying to create hybrid offspring like they did in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 6. Um, of course, I'm referring back to the Nephilim, and that's a whole nother conversation. So I don't know if you want to go down that road or not. That's not really answering your question. So I'll back up.
Right, and there's a disconnect for that as well, for me, because the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
I am not I don't know the Bible well, and so I may be speaking out of turn, but it's my understanding that when God decided to lay waste to all of the heresy that had happened, and all the hybridization, and
Mm-hmm.
the intermingling between humans and animals and all that, that when he laid waste to the Nephilim as well,
Mm-hmm.
they were to live out the rest of eternity without a body,
Right. That is
because
absolutely
they're spirit, correct?
right. So the Nephilim that died in the flood of Noah, the Bible tells us there were giants or mighty men of old. Some were giants, some weren't, in those
Men of
days, and
renown.
also after that. So the ones of that time of Noah's day that passed away, we know from the ancient scrolls, the ancient texts, the ancient books of Enoch and Jasher and other ancient texts, that they were neither human nor angelic. They were half and half. And so, yes, they were cursed to wander without a body. And they are what we call modern day demons. In fact, all of our biblical references to demons most often show them in living people or in living creatures. When Jesus comes up to the man who is possessed by Legion, and he says, "Out," and they're like, "Why are you here to judge us before our time? That man is very much alive." And they ask to be cast into the herd of pigs because they don't want to be without a body. They'd rather be in the pigs. So he casts that demons out. That man is still very much alive, and he goes on and goes off to enjoy his life alive. And then those pigs are possessed, and then they of course run off of a cliff, and the demons are left without a body because the pigs were went frenzied once they were possessed. But no, most of our biblical references show them actually inhabiting live bodies. A corpse, to reanimate a corpse isn't necessarily something that would be so easy for them, because the corpse is going to rot, it's going to smell, it's not going to have all the good things that a live working human body would have, or a live working animal body. I mean, they can inhabit, from ancient things we know, they inhabit statues, they can inhabit stones, they can inhabit all kinds of things. And this again gets back into something that's more Vicky Joy Anderson's area of expertise than mine. I'm familiar with the biblical verses, but she's familiar with a lot more of that than I am. But yeah, they can
So
inhabit all kinds of things.
but that causes me it causes me to question,
Hmm.
is like the experiences that you're having, where you're being taken into a somewhat sterilized surgical environment, and you're
Hmm.
having things done to you. You're having You're witnessing, things being extracted. You're losing pregnancies. They're implanting things into other people. Why would they have the need for that when they can just do it spiritually?
Well, they're talking about
You know
two
what I
different
mean? I
things
mean,
because
well,
demons.
I guess because in my mind they are two different
Yeah,
things.
they are. That's what I'm saying. You're right. You're talking about two different things here. That the entities, there are demons, which are the disembodied spirits of the deceased Nephilim, which can be, the progeny of a fallen angelic being and a human. Those are the demons, like we just talked about. But then we're also dealing with fallen beings that have fallen away from the Creator, beings that have sinned, have decided not to follow the Creator. That some people might call them demonic, but they're not demons. They're just evil. They're demonic. They're fallen away. And they are the other half of that equation that makes a Nephilim. So you've got the fallen entities, angelic entities. Some people might call them fallen angels. Some people might call them gods, the mighty men of old, Zeus, Hera, those types of things. And then you've got humans. And when you put those two together, they procreate and create a being that is a Nephilim because it is a cross between human and whatever these entities are. These entities are far more advanced than we are. They've been around a lot longer than we have. They're dealing in realms and with powers and abilities that we can't even understand, that let alone comprehend, even when it's
which
happening to us.
which leads me to believe in my small narrow mind and my lack of
You do not have a narrow mind, my
understanding.
friend.
Well, but I mean, in the big picture,
Yeah.
of our universe,
Hmm.
is a very small mind. So, you know, I get what you're saying, but if these things are truly not from here,
Hmm.
then it would make sense to me that even though they have the same creator,
Hmm.
they would not have gone through the same biblical times that we did.
Hmm.
And that the references in the Bible to the Nephilim and all that
Hmm.
don't necessarily mean what these are. And what these are, even though they were most obviously created by the same God that created all of everything,
Hmm.
they're wherever they are from. Let's just for argument's sake, let's say they are from Zeta Reticuli. Okay, so all right, just so that we're dealing with two very separate places. You got Zeta Reticuli and you've got Earth. Earth had a bunch of people who heard the word of God, and then over a couple thousand years, they decided to write it all down and put it into a book form, and that's the way we're supposed to live our lives.
Hmm.
I'm pretty certain that did not happen on Zeta Reticuli the same way it happened here. So their moral compass and their understanding of what's right and wrong, or their morality and that, it is going to differ significantly from us. So what we view as being evil and demonic in appearance or behavior, to them may very well just be, this is how we do things. So that's where
Well,
my disconnect between the Bible, because the Bible is based on stuff that happens here.
right.
There's no point in the Bible that they're talking about people on Zeta Reticuli or some other
Right.
planet, So
Well, the Bible actually does talk quite a bit about Mars, about the Kuiper Belt, about all the vastness of the universe and that type of thing. But no, you're right. It doesn't say that they come from any specific place. We don't know we know their dwelling places in the different heavens and the heavenly realms. And we know there's different levels of heaven, and we get into, when you really start to study it out, there's just so much information out there, and most churches don't teach all of that. So we're left with the Sunday school version our whole lives of we get the simple, the the good verses, the ones that tell us to be a good person, don't sin, go to church, love your neighbor, don't covet your neighbor's wife, that kind of stuff. We get to know the 10 Commandments and that kind of thing, and we go to church on Easter and Christmas, and that's fine. But the Bible is a lot more to it than what most people are taught and what most people understand. And then, as far as we know, their story is not our story. You are absolutely right. But their story intersects with our story because
Most
they
definitely.
interjected themselves into our story. I mean, God has them as his watchers to watch over us. God, when he laid the foundations of the earth, the angels sang for joy. They were so happy that he was putting the earth back together because it was already there but had been destroyed in a great battle before we were created. And then, so they are referenced all throughout our Bible, but our story is not their story. And our Christian Bible is not there to teach us about these other beings. It's there to teach us about the Creator, about Jesus, about his sacrifice for us, and about the fact that we get to live in this dispensation of grace and have this amazing gift of eternal life if we want it. And we just have to ask for it. And it's no strings attached, and no one has to, you don't have to go out and do anything peculiar to do it. You just ask and it's there. So the Bible is our story. It is Jesus' story, not the story of the angels. So their story intersects and they are mentioned throughout it. I have to imagine if they had a history or a story, it would be volumes we couldn't even imagine. It would be fantastic, and maybe someday we'll get to know all of that. But what we have is limited knowledge that we get to work with, and then so we have to seek out, experts, people who know. We have to read, and for me it's just reading and studying and trying to learn everything I can about it, and finding, listening to people like you and your podcast, and learning as much as I can.
So, what were some of the most significant, good, bad, weird, unexpected things that have come to you through this?
Yeah. Well, one of the most unexpected things I had to say that happened was I had a near death experience. I call it a near life experience because it was just so amazing. Um, and just the when I left my body and I'm watching everything, and I won't go into great detail because I don't know how much time we have left, so I don't want to run all our
Oh,
time out on
there,
that.
there's no time limit here.
Okay, okay, good. Um, I was going in for a surgery, and it's the whole situation is very strange and unusual. But they took me in for one of my many surgeries, and I was actually in the operating room, but I was not hooked up to any machines or monitors or anything yet. And they took me in, but they weren't quite ready. I guess there was a miscommunication with the doctor. So he's still in an adjoining room getting things together. So the nurses are just, going around checking things in the room. And I only had two IV ports in, and that's it. No monitors or anything. And an anesthesiologist came in to give me a sedative. And she leaned over, and I remember she had in her white lab coat had this pocket full of syringes, and she pulled one out and pushed it in, and then just turned and walked away. And it wasn't a sedative; it was a paralytic. And I know paralytics are common in surgery, but that is only once you're hooked up and you've got something breathing for you and you've got people monitoring you. But I was just laying there with nothing to breathe for me, and I was alone, and I couldn't call out for help. My whole body just felt like it turned to cement almost instantly, and I called out to God to help me. I, in my mind, because obviously I couldn't call out for help. It was like drowning. It was like drowning without water. It was the most horrifying experience. And I heard a voice as clear as me talking to you say, "It's okay, you can let go now." And just like that, in the blink of an eye, I was out of my body and just watching. I could see everything that was happening in all the other rooms. Like I could see through walls. I could hear everything that was happening. I was still me. I had my personality. That was the weirdest thing because it was still me, even though I wasn't, male, female, blonde, brunette, nothing like that. But it was still me, and I felt the most unbelievable, incredible love and peace that you can imagine. There's no words to even describe it. It was just the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. Um, and eventually, once they got me breathing again, and that's, I won't keep going into that, but uh, when I woke up from the surgery,
Oh wait, you gotta go into what was it like snapping back into your body?
oh, everything just went. So I'm watching them. They're reviving me. They tried bagging me. While they're doing that, they come in and they intubate me. And as they put the intubation tube down and start the oxygen flowing, everything went black. And so the first feeling I have of being back in my body is when they brought me out of anesthesia. And I was screaming, just screaming bloody murder. It was just the most pain I have ever felt. It was painful. And they tried for about 4 hours to get me out of anesthesia, and the pain was so intense and overwhelming. They had to keep putting me under so I wouldn't have stroke or heart attack. I did end up having a stroke. That's why this side of my body doesn't move very much. And finally, the about 4 hours in, I remember just going, God help me, I can't do this. And there were these two young orderlies, these two young men at the foot of the bed, and at the foot of the gurney, and they calmed me down and just helped me through it. They were very sweet. I was talking to them. I remember telling them they looked like they could be two of my boys. My kids are all grown, and they're just so sweet. And they helped me through it, calmed me down, and they were with me up in the elevator and down the hall to the room. And we got to the door of my room in the ICU, and my husband and my daughter-in-law were there, and I grabbed their hands and I said, look, you've got to meet the boys. I would not have made it through recovery without them. They helped me so much. And they're like, who? And I'm like, they're right here. And they were gone. And I asked the nurse and the other orderly who was with me, where did those boys go? They were with me. They had no idea who I was talking about. I kept asking everyone. No one else saw them. No one knew who I was talking about. They weren't there for anyone else but me. I was the only one who saw them. But they helped me through a time I would have given up. You have that will to keep going. And the pain was so great. I didn't think I could do it. And they just came to help. All they wanted was to help. They were sent to be kind and loving and benevolent and help. So there are wonderful, benevolent beings out there that show up out of the blue and are just there to help. It's not all bad. It's not all terrible stuff.
Mhm.
There's a lot of good stuff out there. A lot of amazing, beautiful stories out there. It's not all dark. It's not all dark.
Yeah.
But
So let's get into the darker stuff.
okay. Yes, with that said, we can definitely go down that path. Do you yeah, I think for me the hardest part of all this was I kind of for my whole life I was being taken. There was a man who was always with me, and I call him my handler in the book because he didn't have a name. We had a knowing, like an imprint, like kind of like what animals have with each other. Um, so we were together. He was mine, I was his, is basically how it was. And he was kind of my protector when I was taken, when I was abducted. He showed me
So
where I
he
needed.
acted on your behalf.
Yes and no. He, made sure I went where I needed to go. He was always there to kind of guide me, tell me how I had to conduct myself, where we were going for that particular time that I was being taken, and that kind of thing. I had a very much a Stockholm syndrome relationship with him, where I felt a bond with him, I felt a closeness with him, and I felt a comfort level with him because he made me. He was comfortable. He was familiar. Um,
And what
but
did he? I mean, was he a normal looking human man? Was
he
he?
looked normal to start with. Yes, he looked very. I describe him in more detail in the book, but he was very military looking, very tall. He's 6+ feet tall. He had a very square jaw, short haircut. Like a military kind of buzz cut. Um, very very. built, very big build, very strong, not overly, not like a bodybuilder kind of build, you know what I mean? But just a
Yeah.
very strong athletic build. Um, Very nondescript in most ways, just kind of your basic military looking type person. Um, and he was with me all the time. And I always thought that was so weird that I had this person with me all the time until I started talking to other abductees and realized that a lot of them had someone who was always with them as well. Someone who was, for lack of a better word, grooming us to do what we were there to do. For me, I was being groomed to be I think I was there for experiments, whatever experiments they were doing at the time, because I'm not privy to what they were, but they were taking blood and tissue and other samples from me. They were taking, ovum and things from uh, my ovaries. Sorry, couldn't think of the word. Um, yeah, and but
I was absolutely not going to jump in there and say
no.
ovaries because if anybody ought to know it, it should be
Oh
the
my
woman.
gosh, it should be. No, it's
Talk
so
about
funny.
mansplaining.
I was talking to a woman today, a friend of mine who had similar experiences, and we were talking about that today and just about the pain that was associated with that when they would extract the eggs. And so, and I don't know why that just, I think I was just thinking about her instead of thinking about the ovary. Sorry. But she had a really hard time with it too. And it just breaks my heart when I hear other women, that have gone through these things as well. And they'll, share their stories and, and she had a real similar story. But he eventually, I was comfortable with him. I had a very Stockholm syndrome type relationship with him, a very capture bonding thing. He eventually raped me. He raped me in front of other people. They did this in a gallery type setting where there were people in military uniforms, people in lab coats. There were other entities, other types of entities around me. And I listened as they warned them that these are the things that will happen to your family, your daughters, your wives, your children,
If
if you talk. And
so,
I was
this
just one of the many people that used for these types of things. And I felt
so
really
this
bad
was
for
to
these
keep
people.
them in line.
This was to keep anyone who was working there in line. I don't really think the people working there, the humans, I'm sorry, sometimes this gets a little bit. I don't
Oh, I
think that the
imagine.
people who were working there, I don't think they knew what they were getting themselves into. And I think that their method of keeping people quiet is was quite archaic. But I mean, it was just a way to keep people from talking. I mean, when I was little and I was trying to talk to people about this, and you and I kind of touched on this earlier, I didn't know how to describe what was happening to me to even tell somebody because we didn't have the movies and the books and the streaming services
Mm.
and the podcasts and the things that we have today. All I could do was do my best to describe what was happening. The little ones, you know, their eyes, they're the tall ones, or they look like Auntie so and so, or whatever. Nobody understood. And when I did try to talk about it, um, they threatened me, and they threatened to kill my family. They showed me a screen memory in front of where it looks like VR almost. It's so real. It could have been real, but it wasn't. Um, of my family being beheaded in front of me. I was just a little kid, and to tell so that and said if you keep trying to talk about this, this is what's going to happen, and you'll be responsible. I don't, I'm a little
For
kid. How do you put
for
that on a 6-year-old kid? For God's sake, that just was it was heinous. So I was terrified. So I never said a word. I kept my mouth shut from that point on. And until a couple years ago, I never thought I would say anything to anyone about it. But I felt like it was time. My kids are grown. I'm not afraid of them anymore. And that's why I started talking.
Forgive me for asking this, but your rape in front of this gallery,
Mhm.
was that once you had become an adult, or was
Mhm.
this did this happen as a child?
Oh, it was as a young adult. Yeah, they didn't do that until I was of a certain age.
This sounds heinous to ask this, but was there a did a pregnancy result because of it?
Well, I don't know if a pregnancy resulted from that particular incident because the pregnancies were actually inserted. They were harvesting the 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 sexual acts were almost as if they were a part, they were more ceremonial to them. They were more part of a darker part of what they were doing. The the fetuses were, as far as I know, were fertilized outside of the womb and then put back in me and then taken out again around the end of the first trimester, around the third month, about the time that a human body would naturally abort that fetus because it would realize something was wrong. So,
So you you use a phrase in your book, ectogenesis,
mm-hmm.
and I mean that word has been around from probably the early 1920s. I think there was a gentleman from Cambridge who came up with the term, and that was basically the growing and nurturing of a an embryo completely and totally outside the human body. And
Yes.
I mean, we have not. There may be some weird little science places in other countries that may have experimented with this
Mm-hmm.
stuff or maybe doing it, but by and large, the scientific community doesn't recognize that that is quite yet possible.
Um,
Um,
is it? Because I thought now, and I reference in the book, but I have to look it up, that there's an article and that's been released that the artificial wombs have actually been, um, and this came out last year.
okay,
Um,
so if it is in actual practice, then it's got to be very recent.
yes, it's very recent that it's actually been perfected and that it's actually doable here. But the artificial wombs have um, been, and it looks like it was, they're still experimental, obviously, but yeah, they have been perfected. They have been working on them. They have been utilizing them, especially with premature babies and things like that. It's become a very pivotal part of helping some of these babies to survive when they're born too early. But artificial wombs is something that was just the stuff of science fiction, but now it's something we can do today. And I reference it in the book because when I was taken, I saw what looked like rows of. Remember when you go into the pet shop and there would just be rows of aquariums on the wall? There were walls that looked like they were just rows of aquariums, but not fish. They had um, fetuses or things in them, for lack of a better word, because I don't know what they all were, and I couldn't see them all very close.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and one day I was walked down a hallway where both sides were lined with these tanks with things in them, and then at the end of the hallway on either side there were doors, and went into the door on the right, and this entity handed me a baby, a little kind of purplish red baby. Its head was larger than what my baby's heads would have been compared to its body. Its head and its eyes were very large. Its eyes were very dark. It didn't cuddle. I held it. They gave it to me. They told me to hold it. They told me it was a good baby, to take my baby. I held this baby. I held this baby up to me. It didn't cuddle into me. It didn't respond to me. It didn't do any of the things that my children did. I've had, a couple of children, so I knew what I, would expect. None of those things. It was just cold. It didn't even respond to me. It was very upsetting, and I wanted to keep it because I realized that this is my baby. then I'm taking it home with me and I'm going to do everything I can as a mom to take care of this baby and make this baby right if there's something wrong with it. And they would not let me have it. And that was very distressing. That was heartbreaking because I wanted it. It was mine, but it wasn't human. It wasn't okay. There was clearly something wrong with it. And they wouldn't let me
How
have
did
it.
they communicate with you? I mean, what was your, you know, how did that happen? I mean,
Oh,
was it telepathic? Was it were there verbal communications? Were I
yeah, they
mean,
didn't communicate like we do. There wasn't this, talking back and forth. It was all just thought communication, or I don't know how it works. I just know that it worked and that that's how we communicated.
so I would assume that where you're seeing these embryos, these fetuses, you're going back to the same place that you had been taken multiple times before,
Right. That was a similar
during your
place.
similar place.
Mhm.
Can you give a description of what did this look like? I mean, was it exotic? Did it look like it was otherworldly? Did it look like cement and doorways
Yeah.
with doorknobs on it and stuff like that? I mean,
Sure.
I guess what I'm getting at is, did this look like you were being taken someplace that was exotic and not man-made versus were you being taken into a cement bunker that had obvious man-made looking features to it?
Right. I write a lot about where I was taken and try to describe it in great detail as well. But um, part of it, for many times, when I would get there, be taken there by whomever was transporting me that particular abduction experience. It's a huge area. It's enclosed, but it's massive. It's bigger than any airport I've ever been to. I mean, it's just such an open, massive, huge area, and there's just lines of people. And we were all walking towards one particular area where people were being funneled off to where they were supposed to go. And that's usually the point where my handler would find me. Um, I would always just have a sense for where he was. It's very hard to describe that. And go to him and then off to wherever I was supposed to go for that time, for the times that I remembered. There were different areas. Once you go, it's all enclosed, but it seemed like this area was so wide and so open, it almost didn't feel like it was enclosed. But then once I went through, there were areas like hallways coming off of this huge area, almost like, when you go into an airport and you come up to where they security is, and so there's different lines, and sometimes there's different hallways going in different
Mm-hmm.
directions. It's kind of like that, like lots of different hallways, and the hallways
And
were
how busy was this? I mean,
very
were
busy.
you
Lots of people, hundreds of
lots of
people,
people in the same
hundreds,
situation that you were?
hundreds of people. I don't know what was happening to each one of them, but there were
Mhm.
hundreds, possibly, of people at a time.
What was the mechanism by which you were taken there? Were you put aboard a craft?
Yeah,
Were you, spirited away? I mean,
I was put
what
aboard a
was?
craft, and I remember many times being on this craft that had these like bench seats, and they have these little almost like grooves in the bench seats where like each person would sit, so it's kind of like you'd fit back into it. um and there would be these benches, and I don't even know how many. I'd have to think about how many maybe it could fit, maybe 50 people or more on each one of these vessels that would take I would wake up on, and there would be other people there. And if you were disruptive or disorderly, they had these blankets things that they would put on you, and it was like a blanket or a sheet, and it would form over your body, and it was like a straight jacket almost because you couldn't move. It would just like tight, just it was awful. You, and it if people, because most of the people were kind of in a sleep like zombie state, not
I
even
assume I
awake
assume
or aware.
the majority of the times that you were taken, you were in a sleep state.
Sometimes, and sometimes I was awake, but I knew it was happening, and I wasn't even. I was to that point, it's kind of like, well, it's fine because I know where I'm going. I know what's happening. I know I'm going to see my guy who is there. And so I wasn't, there was a point in these that I wasn't as afraid being on those vessels. It was just part of what happened. And I also knew if I acted out that they would put that sheet on me, and I didn't want that. So I would just be calm, especially when I was awake. Wasn't
what was
worth
your
it.
relation what was your relationship after the gallery
Yeah.
incident with your handler?
He wasn't the only one there. And he, I wrote about how it was with him before and during and after that in the book. It was not, he made it seem like it wasn't his fault and it wasn't his idea, but that because he was there, it would be okay because I was comfortable with him. So it was
That's
like,
a piss poor excuse.
yeah, right. But it's like one of those things. I don't know if anyone has ever abused you in your life,
No.
but there's this thing where sometimes you take the best possible from a really bad situation,
Yeah.
and it's all you have, and you hold on to that with all your might. I
And
don't,
I'm sorry. I
I
mean,
don't know.
I
I
don't
think
mean,
it's hard to describe, but I think there's probably some people out there who'll understand that. I'm sorry that I get, oh,
and
this is emotional. I'm so sorry.
well, no, I mean, and I hate bringing it up,
Oh, it's all right.
and keep going back to it,
I
but
hate wasting good
I mean
mascara.
that relationship that you had with him
Hmm.
had to suffer to some extent
Of course. Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
How much longer post gallery had he continued to be your handler, and was the
I
excuse me, was the relationship much more strained after that?
I got comfortable with my role in that because I got to be with him. So it just kind of went on as it was for a long time, for years.
Was that something that he continued to do
I
then?
learned that I learned to equate abuse with love. I learned to equate, something that was very wrong, but I didn't know any better. That's all I ever knew. And it wasn't just me, it was everybody else. Everybody else I've talked to in this situation, these other women, we've been able to talk about this with each other because it's just not something that's comfortable to talk about. So I think I'm going to stop talking about this now with you, but I will tell you, it was just that you equate, you just, it's the same, it's an SRA victim thing where it just becomes who you are and what you do. I think the same way
Yeah.
as just you survive, so you do it because this is the only way to survive because you don't have a choice. So you just have to find a way to make it okay in your mind and go on.
Oh, I'm sorry you went through that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it certainly wasn't pleasant part of my life, but I'm glad that I've been able to talk about it, work through it, and deal with it so that I can have a more normal life and a more normal relationship because these things affect every relationship you have in your life. I mean, there are abductees who are out there on the streets, there are abductees who are homeless, there are abductees who are on drugs or alcohol or dealing with this in whatever way they can because it's a lot. I mean, I had my first little mental breakdown when I was about 6 years old, and they don't stop coming. I mean, the hits just keep coming.
Have you ever been reintroduced to any of what you believe to be your hybrid offspring?
Yes, I have. Aside from the one that they gave me to hold as an infant or as a tiny, I don't even know what stage it was at. I have no idea. A couple of years ago, I was really, I really wanted, I had this, I just, I really wanted them. I thought if they're half me, then maybe there's something salvageable there. I just wanted to know. I wanted to see them. I wanted to know. Um, and I woke up one night and there were three of them standing beside me, beside my bed. They were about 5 feet tall. They were really big and stocky, dark, almost like a bluish color skin, reddish, like a purple blues color. Their eyes were black. And I was just shocked. I was really happy, actually, the second I saw them. And I remember hitting my husband, trying to get him to wake up to see, and he wouldn't wake up. He was just like shut down, shut off. And he wouldn't wake up and he wouldn't move. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you're here. And they just glared at me, and I just felt the most intense evil and hatred coming from them. And I'm like, what's wrong? And they're like, you have to come with us. They're not speaking with their mouth, they're just doing the same, telepathy type speak. So, and they wanted me to come with them, and I said no, I don't want to go with you. And they got even more angry and tried to levitate me and pull me off the bed. And I said, no, I'm not going with you. And I was so disappointed and I was so sad because I really just wanted to love them. And there was just no love, no, nothing. They weren't, nothing. There was nothing loving, nothing at all from them. It was just, all I felt was hate. It was just palpable. And it was so thick, it was palpable. And they wouldn't stop. They just kept saying over and over again, you have to come with us. You have to come with us. And I'm like, I don't want to go with you. No, you have to come with us. And so I'm like, no, in Jesus' name, I am not going with you. And as soon as I said that, they were gone. And my husband shot straight up in bed that second. And he's like, what? I'm like, why couldn't you have sat up 5 minutes ago when they were here, or 3 minutes? It wasn't very long. It was a short encounter.
Yeah.
But I was grateful that I got to see them. I got closure. Um, but I realized that, there was really nothing there for me with them. They didn't have that same kind of love that my own children have for me, or that most people
For
have.
this, from the sound of it, it doesn't sound like they were a true 50-50 hybridization of you and them.
No.
It sounds very much like they were more feature wise and personality wise or demeanor wise
Hmm.
like the entities, correct?
Right, right. They remind me of what people sometimes call the black-eyed kids. And they would have had to have been in like their 30s. So, unless they were freezing my eggs. I have no idea. Like I said, I have no way of knowing how old they would be. But, you
Did
know,
that timeline of what you estimated their age to be, did that line up?
hmm
Did
yeah,
it?
it did. Yeah, it lines up perfectly with the missing pregnancies. I mean, I would get pregnant and go to the doctor and everything would be confirmed. I'd have the doctor's appointments. If you hear a heartbeat, sometimes see a baby with ultrasound, just a little tiny peanut. And then at the end of the first trimester, I would wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning and just have terrible pain and go into the hospital and there's no baby. They would do a D&C and there'd be no fetal tissue, nothing at all. And the doctors would be like, ma'am, are you sure you were pregnant? And it's not like it is today where everything is connected. And I'm like, I give them my doctor's card. I'm like, you can call my doctor and she can confirm, my OBGYN can confirm that I was pregnant, because they didn't even know, believe that I was pregnant sometimes. I mean, but then sometimes they definitely did because I was still testing positive for the hormones in my blood. So at some
Yeah.
point too, they'll test your blood too. And I still had the pregnancy, the HCG hormones in my system. So, it just, they couldn't explain where the baby was. They're like, well, you must have passed it and not realized it. Like, I heard that a lot. And I'm like, I didn't pass anything. I would have known that. So, yeah, but the timing did line up pretty well.
So your relationship with the handler,
Mhm.
it seems like there was a little bit of a give and take as far as he would give you information to some extent.
Mhm. Yeah, there was definitely give and take. It was kind of like I said, it was kind of one of those. Just like I said, I keep going back to it, but it mostly compares to an abusive relationship where here's a pretty dress so that you're happy, but no, this is going to happen. So there
So did
was
he ever share? Did he ever share with you why they were doing this? What was the
no. He said I was important and that I was important to them and I was important to him and to the program, but no one ever, I was never treated with any kind of respect where I was, and where that kind of information, high level information, was ever shared with me. No.
when you were there in in your, I guess we can call it captivity? Did you ever witness or experience seeing any collaborative between the humans? Because you said there you would see
Hmm.
normal humans who didn't seem like they really wanted to be there, but
Hmm.
did you see like collaborative efforts between the two species?
Right. Yeah, they
I
were just
mean,
working side by side. I mean, doing whatever they were doing. I wasn't privy to what their jobs were or anything like that. Different people had different looking uniforms. Some people had like lab coats, and some people had weird, like these beige kind of nondescript, almost looked like scrubs, but not really, kind of smock uniforms. And some people had on what looked like military fatigues, working side by side along different types of entities, where they were Greys and they were Nordics and the reptilian type entities. I never saw anyone working with um, the ones that look like insects, the insectoid type. I only ever saw them off, kind of in the back of the room, kind of watching over everybody, but I never ever saw them talking with or working with a human before. So, but
were you
everyone
ever
else was
able
just kind of walking around with them working.
were you ever able to like scream out or try to make contact with some of the humans that were there around you? And
No, I wouldn't dare because I would get in trouble. I mean, if you were to do something like that, if you were to step out of line, you're going to be shut down. I mean, I would be shut down, to sleep, or put that weight blanket thing on me, or would be restrained or stopped in some way. So, and most of the people, either you're you're going along with it because you've been going along with it for so long, or they're in like a zombie state. You know what I mean? They're not even aware that you're there. If they are, we know they're probably not going to remember it because they have this ability to just wipe your memory. And for some people, it works really well. And for some people, like me, it didn't work really well. And also because I was compliant, I wasn't put in a zombie state, and I didn't like being put in that state. I'd rather know what's going on, as difficult as it is. But I've never seen anyone outside who I was there with, but I have met a lot of people. I'm like, I feel like I know you. I wonder where I know you from, and so maybe one of these days I'll see someone or realize, oh yeah, we were there together. I don't know.
anything in your memory that would give you any kind of indication of where you were being taken?
Mhm. Well, I definitely know that I was taken underground, into an underground facility, because we would go in. I have such clear memories of this, especially from a very young age. We would get in this elevator, and it went down and down and down and down for a long time. And then what I used to describe as the elevators that went side to side, which I realize now were not elevators, but probably like a high speed train, because we'd get off of that elevator and those doors would open, and then they would put me into a different vehicle. And this one, I called it the other elevator, but it had a seat in it, like a bench seats. So I think it was like train cars. But for me, I'd never been in a vehicle that didn't make noise, that wasn't bumpy. that you didn't know you were moving, so it just felt like another elevator.
Did these things look man-made? Did they look like they would have been manufactured or produced by humans,
It's hard to
or
tell.
was there an element of it that looked like, man, this just doesn't make sense? I don't.
Well, it did. Most of it wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't anything we had, so I didn't have anything to reference it to say this is what something looks like when it's made by a non-human creature, and this is what something. I didn't have any reference
Hmm.
points to compare to. I still, really don't. So, looking back, it was far too advanced for what we had at the time, and still is for a lot of things. But it's so hard to tell. I mean, because we can do so much that we're not even privy to the levels of manufacturing and development and construction that are available. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
So where are you at now?
Well, right now, I'm in a good place because I know they can't get to me and they can't hurt me anymore. So now I'm in a healing process and a sharing process, and just a place where we're talking to other people, um, trying to start a conversation, trying to make it okay to have these conversations, trying to share as much information as I can, and trying to get the word out there that this stuff is real and it happens to real people all the time. Real people like your neighbor, real people like your friend, people like your girlfriend, your daughter, your whoever. You never know who it's happening to.
During your time there, as far as the, obviously you're not going to be able to give me exact percentages, but by and large, more females
Hmm.
being abducted, or even Steven?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't. I can tell you, I do remember seeing a lot of women, but I also remember, I saw men too. So, um, what I can tell you now is, it seemed more women coming forward to talk to me than men, but more men than you think. It's a surprising number of men that I have talked to and that have contacted me and reached out to me that this has happened to. Surprisingly, a larger number than I thought.
Would you guess that the male involvement would have been with taking the male part
Hmm.
of a species and
Hmm.
doing the opposite that was being done to you?
Right. And yeah, they reported that as well. Yeah. There's, yep. They're taking sperm from the men, ovum from the women, and they are creating modern day hybrids. As
To
crazy as
what
that sounds.
to what end though?
Well,
What's the purpose? What's the need for it?
yeah, right. Well, there's a couple of different things I think. One is this gives them more entities that they're building an army. The late Dr. Chuck Missler used to say, Satan's outnumbered 2 to 1. He's building an army. Yeah, that makes sense, right? If you don't have the numbers. Um,
But don't you think he's learned already by now
mhm.
that he's not going to win?
He knows he's not going to win, but he wants to take as many people with him as he can. And how do you do that? By deceiving people. And how do you deceive people? Well, you and I both know the more people that you have sharing a message, the more people are going to believe it. So you get a bigger cheering section. You get more voices.
I mean, I don't disagree with you on that. I get it, but the building the army to do what? What is it?
To do
What is it?
exactly
All
that.
these what is it? All these half breed hybrid things that there are. What are they going to do? I mean,
Right. If they can make them look enough like us that they can walk among us, as Dr. David Jacobs has penned in his book, which I tried to read, but it was a little too triggering, so I wasn't able to read it. But if they can get them looking enough like us, they can walk among us, and many people think they do, then they can also,
Robert Bigelow says they're walking among us now.
right? Then they can parrot the message. Everyone, they can share the message that they want, that these are benevolent space brothers, our ancestral seeders, that they are here to save us, to enlighten us, to take us to the next level. And sharing a message that, they're the good guys. I'm sorry, good guys don't kidnap kids and rape women and take babies. It just doesn't
I
work that
agree.
way. So, but if they're getting more and more people to share that message, and more people, everyone wants to believe in the fairy tale and the happy story and the good story, and so you make that story, you get that story out there, and you get enough people saying it, enough people are going to believe it, and they're going to fall away from the truth. So Satan knows he's losing. He's going to take as many people down with him as he can, because that's his big last big fu to God. It makes sense.
It doesn't make sense to me that God would let that happen.
Right. Well, we get
That
free,
that that just, it's like, come on, dude.
but he doesn't.
Don't
As soon as I
don't
called
let
on
it
him, he
happen.
stopped it. So he didn't. As soon as I called on him, he stops him. But look, I have free will. I can choose to follow God, and I can choose not to. The same as these angelic or these fallen entities, or whatever you want to call them, can. Same as everyone else can. We have choices. We get to choose, and we get to choose whether we want his protection or not. Whether we want, and sometimes he just steps in anyway. So, but
See, and
but he did
that's the
stop it.
thing. I would expect him to step in anyway, because if these things are doing what you're saying they're doing, and
Hmm.
they're ramping up an evil army to do this,
Hmm.
and there are millions of people who are uh, com- not following because they want to follow,
Hmm.
but because they don't know any better,
Hmm.
then why isn't there the intervention on his part to be like, no, you know what, leave these people alone. They don't they don't know, they don't understand. Quit effing with them and just be done. Go.
Well, yeah. Why did he let him keep torturing Job until, as long as he did? Because, you know, we're not God, and he doesn't owe us anything, yet he still gives us grace. He still cares and loves us even when we fall so far and so hard. So I'm not really here to make rules for God and what the mind of God
Oh,
is, because I can't know that, but
I'm
I
not
know he's a
asking you to.
compassionate God. So it's a really good question. I just don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry. I wish I
And I didn't expect you to. I mean, I was.
more
I guess it was
rhetorical. Okay. Yeah.
question versus, it's like, how can you let little children die of cancer and
Right.
horrible
Right.
things happen to them, just like the abuse that you
Right.
you sustained as a child.
Right.
How do you let that happen?
Well,
You are
it's
all
sort of
powerful, you are eminent in every aspect
right.
of our world and our existence.
God
Step in
could
and
stop it any second. He could, but we live in a sinful world. I mean, it happened in the Garden of Eden, and it's gone since then. And that's the thing, is he was compassionate enough to let us keep trying to let Noah and his family go on the ark and start again, and to give us a chance, and to give us an opportunity to have this life, and to make what we can from it. But we weren't promised that it was just going to be sunshine and daffodils all the time. There's going to be crazy crap that happens too, and how we handle it. I mean, I guess I've had to realize how I handle the crap is up to me, and I can either take it out on everyone else, or I can take what's happened and try to make something good from it, because I don't want to spend my life being angry at everyone else and angry at God for what's happened to me, because
yeah,
there's a lot of really good stuff in there too.
sure
So
there is.
so
Yeah.
I kind of, I have to remember that I have been rescued when it was to that point, and there's a reason, because God could have let me go, and trust me, there are a lot of times I have prayed and said, God, why didn't you just take me? Why didn't you let me stay with you when I died? I didn't want to come back into this, but then I got to hold my grandchildren. and all these amazing things that life brings you, and you realize, okay, you know there's some really good things that are worth being here for,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we can heal from the bad stuff. And I wish I knew why some of the bad things in this world happen. I wish I had the answers. God, I wish we did,
Well,
but someday we will.
it's easy enough for us to follow and throw our support behind some very evil people in this world now. Um, and I
Yes.
mean, depending on it doesn't depend, I should say, on which side of the political arena you are on. Neither side of us has anything that we should be happy or proud of. Yet we still garner support for these people. And,
Right.
I mean,
At the center of it all, there's an innocent person who's probably going to get killed, and that's where my heart just, you know, hurts, because it's not okay.
yeah,
It's never okay. And that's, I think, you have a good heart, Eric, and I can tell that, and that's why these things, I think, seem to affect you very deeply as well. So many questions we all have. I wish we had answers for all of them.
yeah, I do too. I really do.
But I think you're
That's been my curse.
right.
I mean,
You're finding more
I
questions
can,
than answers.
well, yeah. And, and on the off chance that I do get an answer every once in a while, all it does is create more questions for me. I
Sure.
can't, the whole idea of blind faith, and you just have to, because it goes against every,
Yeah.
not that I'm against God, but it just goes
Sure.
against my every fiber of being. Is like, I need answers. I need to ask a question. I need to have an answer provided for me. And
Sure.
and whatever that answer is, okay, I'm good with it. Just answer my damn question, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
and that's the frustrating part for the way my brain works is,
Sure.
I just always have questions.
Always have another
It
question.
doesn't mean that I don't have a belief in a
Sure.
creator and all that, because I do. But
Yeah.
the next question is, what is that creator? Is is it what
Right.
we've been told by man, that it's God and this, or is it something else?
We
Because
don't
I'm okay
know.
with either
Yeah.
one. I just need to know.
Right. Exactly. And I don't think we'll ever get to know until that time. But what I can tell you for sure is that when I died, my personality was still there, and I felt love and peace that is unbelievable. That is just unbelievable. And I can tell you that for sure, that we go on, and not without the body. We don't need the body and
Yeah.
everything that goes with it, but the the soul and the spirit goes on, and the love and the peace was just, oh, I can't, we just don't have words to describe what it felt like. It was like being wrapped in the warmest, most comfortable, most amazing blanket you could imagine, but that doesn't even come close to,
Well,
I
I
just,
think, in again, in my small mind, I think that's where we came from,
mhm.
and I think that's what we return to. I think we were that before we uh, signed our contract to inhabit these bodies and
Yep.
and do whatever the hell it is we're supposed to be doing here.
Yep.
Um, so
Oh, no, and you got a lot of good questions, and someone has to keep asking the questions, because if we don't ask the questions, we're liable to we'll just be led down crazy paths, and be controlled by others, and we'll never get to the truth.
yeah,
To ask these questions, it's so important, and people need
questions
to
are
be brave
dangerous.
enough to ask the questions, and be
Questions are
willing to hear the
dangerous.
answers too, which they're not always
Yeah,
what we want. But hey, as long as we're asking questions, we're gonna be okay.
yep.
We're gonna be okay.
I preach this in many of my episodes. Ask questions.
Yeah,
Keep an open
so
mind.
important.
Use critical thinking.
So
If it
important.
smells like shit and it
Yep.
looks like shit, chances are it's a
It's
pile of shit.
Yeah. And you can't just put a carpet over it and walk around it. You got to get it
No.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not cool. No, but no, I agree. I agree.
Karin, I want to thank you for taking the time. I feel terrible that I got you emotional
So it's
ab-
okay. You didn't do
about
it.
that.
It's what happened to me, not what you did to me. So thank you for that, though.
but I appreciate you for sharing that, and I'm happy that you've started to heal from it, and that you've found a method that is working for you. I wish that you had a golden ticket that you could throw out there for other people like yourself who are struggling, for a way to find some peace with this and
Me
come to
too.
terms with. Um,
I do have a place on my website where people can reach out to me, and
well,
I do answer everyone who sends me an email. It takes me time because, to get through them all, but I will, if someone reaches out to me, I will do my best always to get back to them. Because sometimes people just want to share their story. And so we'll just talk for a little while and share a story. Sometimes it's just an email and they just want to, email back and forth a little bit. That's fine too. So, if someone does have something like this going on, they can reach out, you know,
well, do
um,
me put that information out, and then I will also link that in the show notes below.
absolutely.
So let everybody know where they can find your book, where they can pick that up, and
Okay.
how they can get in contact with you if they need to.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, you can reach me a couple of different places. My website is my name, KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com, KarinWilkinson author.com. And you can link there to Facebook, Instagram, or to where to purchase the book. The book is for sale right now exclusively at lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net, lamarzulli.net, and /store. And then also you can find me on Facebook at my name, Karin Wilkinson. And Instagram, it's Karin Wilkinson Author because I couldn't get my name on that one. So any of those places you can find me. And I have links back and forth to the different places from them. So, and I'll share all those links with you too as well, Eric.
I appreciate that. I got one more question for you,
Shoot.
and hopefully this is going to be kind of humorous
Okay.
and not super super serious.
Good.
The first time you told your husband,
Mm-hmm.
what was his reaction?
What's funny is his reaction was, wow, that makes a lot of sense. It explained
Really,
a lot of things to him.
really.
It explained a lot. Hmm. Yeah.
It's good that you have support,
Yeah. He
for
was
sure.
very supportive. He's very supportive. He's amazing. I'm very blessed in that respect. And not everyone is, so it's good to find
That's
find a support system. And if you are somebody who knows someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I've had this weird thing happen. I really want to be able to talk to someone about it." I highly encourage anyone out there listening to just listen. Just listen with an open heart and an open mind. You don't have to believe what they're saying. Just be a friend and
just
just
be
be a
kind.
place where they can let it all out. You don't have to solve the problems either to listen. Listening's just being a good friend and listening. I think that's important.
It is very important, and this world needs more of it.
Hmm. Yes, it does. It does. The more people like you, Eric, I
Thank you,
feel like
dear.
we're old friends. It's been lovely being with you tonight. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. It's been a
Of
pleasure
course.
talking to you. Ladies and
Likewise.
gentlemen, Karin Wilkinson, the author of Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. Go out, pick it up now. If you have experiences that are somewhat like what she's gone through, reach out to her. Again, I'll put that information down in the show notes. Karin, thank you so much.
Thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate you. Have a wonderful, blessed rest of your night, and I look forward to seeing you again.
You too.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye bye.